you're on top of the world and your world comes crashing down fast.
Waters rise, waters fall.
And it could change like in a split second. And that's what happened to us.
But communities make it through together.
It was all about getting the job done and getting it done right.
Now, a year after deadly floods, the changes to keep you safe.
Folks need to be aware, and we need to show them and give them the tools to be able to easily do that.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of State of Texas In Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle, reporting from the banks of the Blanco River here in Hays County. It's hard to believe that little more than a year ago, the drought was one of the biggest problems Texas faced. It all changed last spring, though, when heavy rain started to pour, eventually leading to a catastrophic flood right here. Those waters have receded, but their impact on the state remains. And now we're looking to learn lessons from that disaster and what your state leaders can do to keep you safe the next time the waters rise. The flooding that Memorial Day weekend rushed down streams and into the Blanco, Colorado, and San Marcos rivers. Some of those going dozens of miles with no flood gauges to alert weather officials or first responders. Over a matter of hours, the water swept through several cities like Austin, Bastrop, San Marcos, and Wimberley. This all took an unimaginable human toll, 12 lives lost in the water. A father on his way home from a wedding, a husband who lost his life saving a neighbor's, and 3 young children, 2 who are still missing to this day. Those children and their families were staying at what used to be a vacation home you see there across the Blanco River. The water rushed in so fast it swept that cabin away, and only 1 man survived. Now their memories live on as their loved ones push for change up the road in Austin. $6.8 million from lawmakers, money that could help prevent a tragedy like this from happening again.
Among the experts and the officials, a father made sure the Texas Water Development Board would hear his plea during this process.
So, Mr. Schultz, thank you for being here, sir.
Steve Schultz's daughter, Laura McComb, and her 2 children were among those who died during the heavy flooding near Wimberley last May.
They weren't getting warnings. They didn't have warnings. And no TV, so they didn't see anything on TV or anything.
Those words helped Chairman Beck Brune and the other board members make a decision: how to spend millions of emergency dollars to save lives.
If we click on the red button here, for example, there's one that's showing in moderate flood.
Now the board has developed a website, texasflood.org, a user-friendly, one-stop site for just about anything people in flood-prone areas would need to know.
Easy to get to, that's easy to see, and that's accessible not just on a computer but as well on a smartphone.
The site will have updates from the hundreds of existing river gauges across the state, and the board is installing at least 30 more in the coming months. Many, like the new ones upstream of Wimberley, will have cameras for viewers to watch the rising waters.
Someone that lives in Wimberley can go to texasflood.org and be able to click on the specific gauge and see what the conditions are.
And some of the gauges will be faster.
Every 15 minutes, we think that's a good barometer and a place to be.
The board is also collaborating with the National Weather Service to install weather systems at streams across the state, rain collection, and soil moisture calculation for better forecasts. 5 of these devices just went in upriver from Wimberley.
Really, the emergency appropriation has given us an opportunity to step up and be more engaged on the infrastructure side.
Along with that infrastructure, communities can now apply for grants from the Water Development Board for early warning devices like this. That application period is open right now and runs through June 17th. You can find a link to that application and the state's website on our own website, kxan.com. Now, all of this work could have gone off the rails last fall. A KXAN investigation revealed a financial snag that could have kept millions for disaster planning out of the hands of Texans. As that deadly flooding hit in May of last year, state lawmakers were wrapping up the legislative session, challenged in making budget changes so late in the game. Senator Kirk Watson, who we'll speak with later in the program, worked with Governor Greg Abbott's office on a last-minute tweak to a bill for this emergency funding. We discovered the money eventually went to the wrong account and not flood preparedness. Our coverage drew the attention of the governor, the lieutenant governor, the legislative budget board, and the state's comptroller, who all got involved to find a way to fix this problem. Now that the money is available, we check back with the governor, who tells us it's crucial Texas has the most sophisticated tools to provide Texans with the resources they need to safely respond to rising floodwaters. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick also said he was committed to making Texas better prepared for flooding across the state. He says proactive approach will better protect residents.
We're not out of the woods. It could happen tomorrow. I brought my umbrella.
The disaster that changed it all. A look back on those dark days, Memorial Day weekend last year, and where we are now. Ahead on this special edition of State of Texas In Depth.
We investigate because the most important part of our story is you.
Sometimes I still don't think it happened, but right now it's just getting over missing them.
The scars of floods aren't always obvious. While the land may have healed, hearts have not. In just one day, Kristen Daniel lost her sister, her mother, father, nephew, and friends. They were all vacationing along the banks of the Blanco River. A wall of water washed away homes there and even this bridge. A year later, this is what the Fisher Store Bridge looks like today. Funds from TxDOT helped replace the bridge, but other work has been much slower. Part of that was because this was such a historic flood. Here's a look back at KXAN's coverage in those tense days.
It is an all-time record flood of the Blanco River.
Blanco River at Wimberley now at 39 feet.
39? You were kidding me.
39 feet.
This is an unbelievable amount of water that has allowed for a historic flood to come through the Wimberley area.
Take a look behind me at the Blanco River. It is just swallowing up the road and homes as it just comes through this area.
This is a life-threatening situation. There are people on their rooftops in Wimberley right now.
We understand at least 68 rescues have taken place. We caught up with one of the folks who evacuated in Wimberley overnight. Rick Byers lives off Blanco Road. He has lived there for 23 years, and he says he has never seen anything like this.
And it just kept coming and so we started loading stuff into the car, you know, possessions that we couldn't. Anyway. And then we came out up here to high ground.
As of 6 a.m., we are told, again, there have been at least 68 water rescues in Wimberley. Jim was saying earlier that officials are telling us at least 350 homes are underwater.
Heartbreaking story out of Wimberley tonight where up to 12 people are still missing, including 2 families with children. They were swept away in the flood sometime after midnight Sunday, when the house they were staying in reportedly broke apart.
They include the McComb family. You see here Laura McComb and her 2 children, Leighton and Andrew, who were vacationing at the time at a cabin on the Blanco River.
KXA's Lindsey Bramson spoke today with Laura's sister, who was on the phone with her when their cabin was swept away.
We are in a house that is now floating down the river. Call Mom and Dad. I love you. And pray.
Those were the last words Julie Shields had with her sister Laura. She was on the phone with her when the cabin she was staying in with her husband Jonathan and 2 kids was carried away in the rushing water.
My sister will always be my sister.
The conversation ended when Laura thought she saw light from a helicopter above there to rescue them.
And I just expected to go to the Wimberley High School the next day and find her. And then when she wasn't there, I knew something was very, very wrong.
Jonathan was found 12 miles away and was taken to a San Antonio hospital for treatment. Laura and their 2 kids, Leighton and Andrew, still missing. Julie says Jonathan did everything he could to help save them, but the cabin eventually split apart, separating them.
The blessing in all of this is that she is with her children. And she is with her babies, and she will be with her babies always in heaven.
Search and rescue crews are hard at work along the Blanco River, still looking for the dozen or so people missing. They were also searching by air.
Our Phil Prazen was the only reporter allowed to go up in that helicopter with the Lieutenant Governor. Phil joins us now. Phil, I know it was hard for you guys. A lot of what you saw was absolutely devastating.
It's so sad. And the first thing the Lieutenant Governor pointed out to me was this concrete slab, pipe sticking out of the ground. He says, That's where those 3 families were staying. That's the last place people saw them. And from the air, this thing looks entirely different. On the ground, you can pick up the debris, you can pick up the tree branches, but in the air, you can see how big it is. The river totally doubled in size. The fire chief here says that the river was 20 feet higher than he's ever seen it before.
And this gives you a better idea of the damage. You can see the bridge near Fisher Road on the Blanco River was destroyed, washed away.
This debris shows just how high the Blanco River got at its peak. Now, this is Highway 165 extending west into Blanco, but this bridge that usually goes over the river is now resting in it.
I'm nervous. Heck, I grew up in these creeks and rivers.
Carol Walker lives near Blanco Settlement. The RVs on the river banks and the road that passed by didn't stand a chance when nature made its own path.
It came up so fast. We had literally 20 minutes to get out. I looked out my back window and literally saw a wall of water coming. And you just watch everything going away. And I heard a lady screaming in the river. And it's been horrible to have to live with the fact that there's nothing you could do for her.
Did you see that? Because all they saw was a forearm waving frantically.
They could hear her screaming in Spanish, and because of the raging water, Horton and his crew had a hard time getting to the woman.
She's like holding onto a tree and her body's like flaking out in the current.
They couldn't get their boats to her, but that's when Horton's homemade creation, small enough to carry on his uniform, became priceless.
Just enough for me to make the swim to her.
With 150 feet of rope, Horton swam to, put a life jacket on the woman, and brought her to land.
One of the most dramatic videos yet comes from a family in Leander who had to be rescued from their cabin on the river.
Oh no!
As soon as the water came through the window, I knew that we were in trouble.
We have a Tahoe and his brother has a truck. We just watched them float away like they were toy boats.
I think the worst thing was not knowing what was going to happen.
Oh no! They described the rushing water like a freight train. They watched as it crashed through their cabin, water rising in just a matter of minutes.
Smelling fire and stuff after the water came in because the electrical stuff was burning up. So that's when I really started panicking.
Finally, flashing lights. Help was close by.
Pulled up with a boat, and from the second-story window, we just climbed into the boat. And I was holding my daughter.
It's hard for Sarah to think about what if help hadn't come.
I'm sorry.
A rare sight, Max Starkey Dam, and that siren tells us that a 5th floodgate has now opened to relieve the pressure from upriver.
That is Shoal Creek pouring into Lady Bird Lake. David, let's look at that. Look at that flow right there. Again, if you've just joined us, stay away from Lamar Boulevard in the downtown area. Shoal Creek is out of its banks.
I want you to take a look at this video of Shoal Creek at its highest point. This is along Pease Park at MLK and Lamar. Water was covering the sand volleyball course and coming all the way up to the road.
That water reached nearly 21 feet. We witnessed several water rescues where there's usually a sea of pavement rather than water. This one happened outside the Monarch condos near where Shoal Creek meets Lady Bird Lake. It's our best view of the flooding in downtown Austin from our Austonian weather camera. Look at that. The highest camera in Austin from 700 feet up. We could see the scale of the flooding at House Park.
It is flooding House Park. I have never in 25 years seen anything like this. Look at Shoal Creek. Look at the football field. You can't see the football field. The water is into the bleachers. Somebody that appears to be holding on to a telephone pole. This is in real time evidence of how dangerous the jobs that these men and women do who respond to flash flood situations. They got him. They got him out of there. Poor guy. Look at him.
He has to be exhausted.
He looks exhausted. He looks, oh, can you imagine how relieved he must be? He looks to be, I'm sure he's in some degree of shock right now. He was just in a life and death situation, and he has just been saved.
Too often, tragedy is what creates outcomes that we should have had before.
Out of our deadly floods, the changes coming from your leaders at the state capitol. Next on State of Texas In Depth.
The immediate response to these efforts, both at the state and the federal level, would just be more cost-effective and empower local governments to better serve the people of our state.
The lessons for state leaders from Hays County Commissioner Will Conley. His part of the county was hardest hit Memorial Day weekend last year. But if you look at the town of Wimberley today, you'd probably never know something had happened, except for the Wimberley strong flags you see just about everywhere. State lawmakers are now looking to bring that same showing of support during disasters in other parts of the state. A legislative panel recently discussed ways to push state agencies to be better prepared. They say this could help decrease the amount of money spent on wildfires, floods, and other disasters. It will likely be among the legislation we see in the upcoming session at the Capitol. And some of those bills will no doubt come from the man who spearheaded the funding we told you about earlier. Austin Senator Kirk Watson sat down with us to talk about the challenges ahead for a state without a statewide flood policy.
Now, what kind of legislation could we expect from your office?
One is you can expect me to work very closely with the Water Development Board on the money side of it and work directly with Chairwoman Nelson, who's the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. But a key part of this is going to be money. The second part is anything that the Water Development Board, and we're working closely with them, anything that the Water Development Board, as they start the process of figuring out how best to utilize that money to save people's lives and property, anything that they see that creates a hiccup, creates a roadblock, anything like that, we're going to be at the forefront of trying to eliminate. We need to make this as easy as possible.
With the session not starting till January, you know, in the middle of the winter, when flooding might not be top of mind, how do you keep that interest level in making an impact going?
Unfortunately, in the Texas Capitol, too often people's memories are way too short when it comes to what we need to do on behalf of our constituencies. What I intend to do is make sure that as we get closer to the session and then during the session, we have real people reminding folks about what has happened so that we keep the tragedies we've had at the front of people's minds.
The state of Texas, unlike many states, doesn't have a statewide flood plan or one agency that's dedicated specifically to flood mitigation or flood preparedness or flood response. You know, is that something that you could see in the future of Texas?
Absolutely. I don't think anybody would really question that Texas is behind when it comes to flood planning. That's one of the reasons the legislation was filed a couple of sessions ago, was to create a source of funding to do better flood planning. That hasn't been used that way. So we need to make sure it's used that way, and if we need to, and I want to listen to the experts on this. I want to listen to the folks at the Water Development Board and others that are paying daily specific expert professional attention to it. Tell me what you need in terms of that.
It seems like everyone knows something needs to be done.
I've not seen in any aspect of this any sort of partisan activity. And that there's no way you can characterize saving people's lives that are facing natural disasters as a partisan issue. We need to just do it.
Coming up, for the first time, experts are developing technology that will allow people here in Central Texas to get forecasts at the street level when this special edition of State of Texas In Depth returns. The severe weather season is upon us, a grim reminder of the devastation from deadly floods last May. Welcome back to State of Texas in Depth. Now, a made-in-Texas solution that's set to give forecasters the unheard-of ability to predict flooding like that hours, maybe days out. Right now, our forecasts rely largely on atmospheric conditions like moisture and wind speed. The forecast of the future, though, is combining that sky forecast with what's on the ground. Important information that comes from weather forecasts, stream flow gauges, watershed maps, land cover and elevation maps, and FEMA floodplain maps. To learn about this radical approach, KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell traveled from Central Texas to Alabama to the all-new National Water Center.
The mission of the National Water Center is in the same life-saving category as, say, the National Hurricane Center or the National Storm Prediction Center, all providing real-time information for Americans when severe weather strikes. It's just that this center specializes in collecting information from the nation's rivers, creeks, and streams to make flood forecasts, and the first of its kind. So when it floods in Central Texas, what will happen here?
From here, we will be verifying data, verifying forecast, backing them up. These will be the models that will go out nationally and that will be implemented across the nation.
The Water Center feels more like a high-tech lab than a government agency. In June, engineers and researchers say they'll flip the switch on what they describe as a game changer in water forecasting.
How confident are you that this is even going to work?
I think out of sheer determination it will work. I believe that this will not fail. I think we have a lot of people from many different backgrounds all focused towards making it happen.
At the forefront is a man back here in Austin, University of Texas hydrologist and engineer Dr. David Maidment.
In the future, when you see a TV meteorologist who's looking at the rain maps in the sky, they'll also be able to look at anticipated flood mapping on the ground.
With an eye to actually predicting a looming flood, UT students zeroed in on one particular water crisis. They recreated Austin's Shoal Creek flood from last May with existing data, the forecast, creek levels, even the slope of the nearby land. Professor Maidment says this kind of trial is the backbone for the Water Center's ability to predict floods anywhere in the nation.
You're able to spit out a flood forecast on the ground.
Yes, sir.
In how much time?
In 10 minutes.
Stay away from Lamar Boulevard in the downtown area. Shoal Creek is out of its banks.
The real Shoal Creek flood left local property owners and first responders scrambling, including this water rescue at House Park.
You can see this is in real time evidence of how dangerous the jobs that these men and women do.
I've always been frustrated that there's no way to know, well, where is it going to flood? I mean, you're just telling me it might flood somewhere in Austin. Where? Which creek? How much? Is it going to flood my house or is it not?
People who live along Shoal Creek, like Susan Gamish, say even a little heads up would have saved them a world of grief.
If I'd had even just an hour, we could have saved photographs. I mean, all my photographs, you know, from traveling around the world and of my daughter when she was a baby, all of that was gone.
I want you to go find something that'll float.
Sending out an accurate local water forecast is only part of the game. The other piece is making sure first responders have the tools they need to plan ahead.
I'm providing that translation or that message to the public safety community about what they're working on.
This retired Austin fire chief was at the helm when historic floods hit Austin on Halloween 2 years ago. Now, Harry Evans is working with UT's Professor Maidment to make the massive computer models easy to understand for first responders locally. These colored street address maps, now being tested in Austin, show firefighters what to do, from where and when to call for evacuations to the safest routes to take, ideally decisions that will happen hours ahead of time.
If Onion Creek were to flood in a year from now, AFD wouldn't be flying nearly as blind using this technology.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. Because they'd have information beforehand about the severity, and they would have already pre-planned out their actions.
That was Robert Maxwell reporting. Now, it is probably a year or so before you can get that forecast on your phone, but we will keep you updated. Throughout this program, we've looked at the deadly flooding in Central Texas 1 year ago. To see KXAN's complete coverage of that historic event, check out our interactive online feature, River Rising. There's a link right now on KXAN.com. From all of us with KXAN's political and weather teams, thank you for watching this special edition of State of Texas in Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.